Welcome back, everyone, to Aspire to Lead, where we will be discussing the visions, inspirations, and experiences from top educational leaders. My name is Joshua Stamper, and you can connect with me on Twitter or on Instagram at Joshua_Stamper. All right, welcome back, Aspire Leaders, and I am so excited for my guest today because I've been connected with him for years, and I was saying before we pushed the record button, I have no idea why he has not been a guest, but I'm so fortunate not only to be connected with him, but to have him here today. Dr. Matt Rhoads, thank you so much for being on Aspire to Lead.
Yeah, thanks, Joshua. It's great to be here, and it's 2 years since we've had a podcast together, so I'm fantastic to be on yours this time around.
Yeah, we get to flip the script. It was such an honor to be on your show, and I just remember that as such a fond memory, and to be able to have you as a guest is a true honor. And before we jump into a bunch of really important leadership topics, I would love for you just to share a little bit about yourself as far as your educational leadership journey.
Yeah, so I have a lot of different hats. So really, I was a classroom teacher in the special education world for several years, and then I jumped into some instructional coaching, and then my current role, I support a group of adult education schools, and I support about 6 different campuses, and I focus on ed tech and instructional leadership. So I support about 100 teachers that are all in like ESL, for example, career technical education, high school diploma. So wide variety of different groups of teachers, which makes it really interesting and fun because I could go into like a nursing class one day, I can go into a QuickBooks class, I can go into an IT class, I can go into an ESL class, I can go into just a wide variety of different classes, and they're in person or blended or online. So it's a lot of fun. So I get to see a lot of different environments and work with a lot of different people that are in the fields that they are experts in teaching our students. In addition, I am also a professor at San Diego State University. I support teacher candidates in the dual language and special education programs. And I'm also a professor at Concordia University, Irvine. And I support doctoral students, and I have several that are researching underneath me. And they're focused a lot on instruction and ed tech integration are most of the topics.
Man, you were right. You have a lot of roles and hats and responsibilities. But the main thing I feel like you're doing is you're helping other educators as far as their understanding of instruction and instructional coaching, and then also like that doctoral piece. So can you just speak on that as far as, what got you into this passion of wanting to help as far as instructional coaching?
I just always, back even when I was in my undergrad, I just always loved tutoring. And I think just working with, whether it's individuals one-on-one or a small group, and I like that human connection, and I like building people up, and I like seeing them grow. And ultimately that's, I think, where the love for it and purpose came for it. So I think that just over my career has just grown into a lot of different avenues where I'm doing that type of work.
Yeah, you're also an author of, well, I can't count how many books. How many books have you authored now?
I got 10 books.
10 books. Congrats on that. And all of them I know are extremely impactful. I know one of them was Co-Teaching Evolved, Partnership Strategies for an Equitable, Inclusive, and Tech-Powered Classroom. And I kind of use that as kind of our guideline just because that co-teaching piece, I feel like I haven't had too many guests to speak on that. And I know, with your expertise, especially as far as the instructional coaching piece, I'm curious how you go about getting a environment where co-teaching is successful, because I know a lot of people based on my administration experiences that have tried it and have not had success in that.
Yeah, so co-teaching involves a lot of different facets, and really what we discuss in the book is first and foremost is building the systems within schools to make co-teaching a viable strategy, as well as then putting in the right teachers and personalities in it to make it work. So first, when we are focused on co-teaching in schools, we focus on a leadership chapter where we really want educational leaders to focus on what are structures in place that are needed for co-teaching. For example, when you're a special education teacher, you have a lot of hats. You're supporting students on a caseload usually, as well as possibly even having your own specialized academic instruction type classes, and then also co-teaching. One of the most systematic things that they can do is make sure those special education teachers have a planning period as well as an IEP period. So if we're looking at middle school and secondary, the high school level, they have that secondary planning period. So they're in a classroom at least 4 periods a day, but then they have at least 2 periods for planning and monitoring. So that's one structure. And then also too, when you're co-teaching, you want to make sure that you're only co-teaching with one person at a time, and you're doing it for at least 2 periods at a time. So if you do that one-off co-teaching period, then ultimately, how are you going to be able to plan with that co-teacher? And it's only 1 period. So you really don't have that full buy-in. But when you have 2 or more periods, and ideally it could be 3 or 4 periods with that same teacher, it creates that buy-in, because essentially that special education teacher and general education teacher are going to be teaching with each other most of the day. And another really important structural piece is that they have a common planning period. So the special education and the general education teacher have that common planning period. And really, if you're looking at those type of structures and have those in place, that foundational piece, that really does help, because we see a lot of schools where there's no planning period, or there's no structure in place for a common planning period for the co-teachers, and you don't set up those necessarily just basic structures at first, you're going to start burning people out. And that's what I see in a lot of co-teaching programs that are not sustainable. So that's kind of the first piece. And then the second piece really is selecting the right people to be co-teachers, especially general education teachers, so that they are bought in. So I like to have a structure in place before even the school year begins. So it's in the prior school year, around like April, May, you have essentially this speed dating type arrangement where you have a number of people that may be interested. They fill a number of surveys, personality attributes, and then you match people up based on those personality attributes. And you can focus on philosophical things in education as well as tendencies for like instruction and classroom management and that type of thing. And you can start matching people that way. And you give them those conversation opportunities to, at a number of lunches, have conversations with a number of these teachers that you match with. And then ultimately, over time, you are able to then, after the speed dating has occurred, essentially, you get to then start teachers and school leaders that are in those conversations get to rank each other. And when you're done ranking each other, then the best of the ranks that are average, that's how you match the partners. And then ultimately you have a higher buy-in as a result, because likely people that rated themselves together, in most cases, are going to want to teach together. So I think that is a very necessary structure that you have in place even prior to the school year beginning. And then if you go into the leading into the next school year, you provide a number of opportunities later in the summer and then even before school for those newer partnerships to plan together. And you set up a number of structures where not only do they learn the co-teaching strategies, but also they learn how to plan together. What does that backwards planning look like? And then also, what does it look like in terms of breaking down the roles, and what exactly are they going to be doing in terms of planning instruction, assessing student learning, and then just setting up the structures and kind of memorializing everything in a contract of what they're going to all do. And that can be like a week, essentially, of time together where they're, leading up to the semester. It could be 3 times, it could be 2 times. But I think there's a lot of necessary groundwork that you have to have in place so that when you put the teams together and have them start going with actual students in the classroom, that they're going to be set up for success. And we just see so too often where those structures and that time is not put into co-teaching, where we see it really start to fall apart. And then just throughout the year, you have, whether it's an instructional coach, school leaders by coaching, observe the classroom, but also let the co-teachers at times observe other co-teachers at your school site so that you can see them teach. That's just some of the main structural pieces that you should have in place. And I can, after you kind of follow up, I can talk about more of the relationship piece.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you about just the systems and things that are put in place. I love what you're talking about, especially as a leader. Those are things that you may not even think about. You're looking at your master schedule. Oh, you have an opening. You're put together, and let's go. And you don't think about that planning aspect of things. Also, in the summer, I love what you had instructed as far as like that speed dating, allowing people to have an opportunity to talk prior to find a match that's going to be the best fit for them moving forward. So yeah, please talk about the relationship with that whole co-teaching model.
Yeah, so it's part of, as a school leader, you can provide, a number of documents to help them build that shared philosophy as well as kind of shared understanding. So within our book, we describe a number of ways for teachers to write down their philosophies related to instruction, classroom management, but then another scaffolds in place for them to kind of come up with an agreement. So essentially it's coming together. You may not fully agree. It's essentially, we have a Venn diagram. And you're going to have places where you're not going to agree, but the goal is to try and get as much as you can into that center piece of that Venn diagram, and have a number of exercises leading up into that. And so that once that Venn diagram's filled out, they can start then developing kind of like a memorialized contract for their partnership of how can we essentially function moving forward and be successful with our students. And there's going to be times throughout the year where things are going to shift. But then, for example, when your contract's in place with that co-teacher, you're going to say, who's going to be assessing all these students, or who's doing the planning, how are we can be communicating with families, are both of us CC'd on an email, or is there just going to be one point of communication? Who's going to be doing most of the IEP input? So just you divide all those roles up, and it's really important that, if you have those established, then you're going to be much more successful, because if you leave those up to chance, someone might feel like they're being overworked, or they might be overshadowed. So those are really essential elements. And I think one of the most important things as a school leader, for school culture to ensure those relationships start off at a really, really good way, is put both the teachers' names on the door. Because sometimes both names are on the door. It's just a general education teacher, or even in the learning management system or in the student information system, you only have one teacher of record. And generally that sometimes is the general education teacher. And when that happens, that doesn't show that it's a very shared environment. So sometimes those little things as well really can make the difference in ensuring that relationship means something to the school leader and the greater school community. So those are just a few things that my co-author, Dr. Belinda Carge, and I talk about in the building, relationships chapter for the partnerships.
No, I love that. And again, those things that you don't really think about, but would be a factor for making it a successful environment. I'm curious, for our leaders, is there something that they need to think about prior to even starting maybe a co-teaching structure, where collaboration needs to be enhanced prior to putting this or implementing this right away?
Yeah, so we talk about a number of these structures. So one is essentially developing like a 3-year plan for co-teaching, where the first year is they're not even co-teaching at that point, but you're starting to build out teams where they're observing possibly other teachers, they're co-teaching in your district or nearby, and also kind of learning some of the basic co-teaching strategies so that they can be successful. And then really going into the second year, it's where you have a far less number of teams than you do your third year, but you start off with a number of sections where you're starting to co-teach, and then by year 3 you're going to move into even more sections. So you're slowly building over time, but you're also building those structures as you go. And then over time is you're not trying to put everyone all on this at once. You're doing it in a scaffolded manner, and so that you make sure you get all the tweaks out as you go. By year 3 you're in pretty good shape, and hopefully a lot of the year 1 teams, they're going to stick as teams going into year 3. So then the people that are joining in, teachers that are joining in for year number 3, are going to be able to see in all the better co-teaching modeled, and those partnerships and teams can be still in place so that they can see those as a model and they can learn from them.
All right. So in the title of the book, you have tech-powered classroom. So I'm curious, is AI a part of that tech-powered classroom?
It is. So we talk a lot about how AI can help support the planning process and the content creation. But I think when we think about co-teaching classrooms, really to differentiate the instruction so that you can meet multilingual learner needs, as well as students with disability needs, as well as students that may have social emotional needs. So I think that you can utilize a lot of AI tools to really focus on differentiating that content and quite quickly. So we talk a lot about how a partnership of co-teachers can use what we call AI co-pilots. They're essentially, as Ethan Mullock says, co-intelligence to help them build out that content. And we described kind of the workflow of when you're planning. So whether you're in person or you're on Zoom, you have your AI out while you're talking to your co-teacher, and you're starting to really build out content for your class based on the curriculum that you're utilizing during that planning time. And it can really help you build out stuff, long term, but also, really on the spot. So that's kind of a lot what we talk about. We try to be agnostic in terms of what AI tools that are out there, because there's a lot that you can choose from. We mentioned that, but also we discuss a lot of AI tools where it's an ed tech tool, but it has AI integrated in it. We talk about tools, particularly like CurryPod, quizzes. I mean, essentially everyone now has that AI integration. So we describe kind of how we can integrate that into the workflow. to cut down on time, but also allow us to diversify our instruction so that we can support our students' needs, whatever they may be, in a efficient way, but also in a sustainable way. Back when I was co-teaching around 10 years ago, really more early on in my career, I can't imagine how much more time I would have to work with students if I had AI to support in planning and developing the content for my class and differentiating the curriculum. Even as someone that's very tech oriented, I could have much more time on my hands to support students in their needs.
So that's obviously AI with the co-teaching model. I'm curious what your opinion is as far as the role of AI with like leadership and coaching and instruction.
Yeah, so I talk a lot about, and I do it on my daily basis, so I do observation notes. I write down strategies that I'm seeing in real time and notes, but then I put in a number of prompts on some of my favorite AI tools, and I develop the observation notes and reports, which I send out to teachers as a result, and action items related to what are we going to focus on in our next coaching session or in our next professional development, as well as maybe what are some things I'm looking for in the next time that we are, I'm observing your class or having a coaching interaction with you. So that's something that I use quite often. That's one way. Also, too, I use it for a lot of data analysis. I just make sure that students' names and identifiable information is taken off. I look at assessment scores, and I do a lot of analytics, and we can sit down with a teacher looking at their formative and summative assessment scores and really kind of see where the gaps are. So that's another way of doing it as well with teachers. And also having is, within the PLC model, we do a lot of what we call data dialogues, where we review data from a department and look at seeing like what are the trends, and we use AI for a lot of the data visualization piece so that we can break it down and so that we can see it in a way that's easy for us to understand, and also we can look at possibly if we continue going this way, what are some predictions and forecasts in the future. So that's one. Yeah. That's another way that we use it for school leadership.
No, I love that. Those are all practical and wonderful ways to use AI. And I know a lot of our teachers and educators and leaders are struggling to figure out what to do with AI, because obviously it's a very powerful tool, but how is it going to enhance or improve our roles? So I love those suggestions. All right, Matt, I would love to talk about two more of your resources. So the first one, Crush It from the Start, 25 Tips for Instructional Coaches and Leaders. I know that was released not too long ago. So do you mind just sharing a little bit about that resource?
Yeah, so in this book in particular, it talks about 5 aspects of instructional coaching and leadership that I think whether you're an assistant principal, instructional coach, or someone at the district office should really have, as facets and skill sets to navigate schools in the age of AI. And I think just kind of modern schools, because I think over the last 5 to 10 years, a lot has changed when we go into a school and classroom. So I think there's a lot of things that we need to focus on as leaders that are far different than what they were prior. So there's 5 themes. The first one is building relationships as a leader and coach. The second one is cognitive science. So having a strong understanding of cognitive science and understanding how memory works and learning works, and really being able to identify the strategies that can support learning that are really research-based. Then the third is EdTech and AI integration. So how does that look like in classrooms? Talking about how to coach with a wide variety of EdTech tools, selecting the tools, as well as the instructional strategies that go with them, as well as understanding as a school leader, how can teachers be utilizing AI in a way that supports student learning needs, and sitting down with them and showing them how to plan using AI, differentiating using AI, and just developing those workflows as a coach and instructional leader so that you can create more of a sustainable practice. And I think that's kind of ultimately should be one of the goals nowadays with school leaders and coaches. The fourth piece is how we coach. So what does coaching look like? How do you coach? So whether that's, informal coaching cycles, there's so many different types of informal coaching cycles. I talk about probably 10 to 12 different types of coaching, whether it's informal or formal. Talk a lot about some famous ones like the impact cycle that Jim Knight talks a lot about, the grow cycle, ignite sessions, on the spot coaching, and then also talking about, how can you manage that logistically as a coach? So by setting up your schedule, utilizing AI, to doing your notes. So we spend a lot of time in that section talking about how coaching happens and how you can do it as a coach. Then fifth is the systems thinking theme of the book, where we talk about, as a coach or instructional leader, you have essentially your own context and areas that you can make an impact in. So sometimes it might be just around the edges. Sometimes it might be more wholeheartedly within its school or district. So it talks a lot about how you can navigate what your role is as a coach or instructional leader in your context, and thinking about everything in systems so that you can create a sustainable and impactful practice by essentially being in your own lane, but also understanding that, you know, you're part of a larger, greater system that you're trying to make an impact in. So that's kind of the book in a nutshell, but that's kind of how I feel that what type of leader you are, focused on instruction, how you should be able to navigate and coach teachers.
Is there any other resources you want to touch on? I know you have a lot of books, so we're not going to go through all 10, but
no. Those are just the most recent. I have another one, 50 Tips for New Teachers, who I wrote with a wide variety of different authors, which was fantastic. Supporting new teachers, because that's what I do in my role in San Diego State University, supporting students and pre-service teachers. So that's a lot of just tips on how to navigate classroom, similar kind of, but that's for the teacher side of the house versus the instructional leadership book that I just discussed. So
sure,
that's another one. And just have a variety of other books on EdTech integration, which is what I do on a daily basis. And yeah, I blog a lot about a lot of different things, from instruction, leadership, EdTech, all on my blog, and talk about really everything that really impacts education. So I just love writing and sharing my thoughts about what's actually happening in schools that I'm working on a daily basis. My consulting opportunities, where I go in different schools and see what's going on. So, it's just one way for me to, like, podcasting. It's a way to kind of share your thoughts, and maybe some people will actually listen, and in my case, read the pages of the book.
For sure. I want to talk about the consulting side. So will you just share a little bit about how you're supporting schools all over the country?
Yeah, so I do some consulting work with Solution Tree on co-teaching. Also, I can do consulting on instructional leadership and coaching, whether that's just focused on purely instructional strategies or EdTech integration. So that's definitely what I'm providing consulting on. I've developed courses as well for some large organizations to relate to instruction and PLCs and that type of stuff as well. So it's always enjoyable to do those type of things, because you're able to kind of get out of what you're normally seeing and seeing something else in the world, and kind of helping and supporting teams in that way.
Yeah. What Matt's saying is he's extremely talented and can support you in any way possible. So make sure you're heading over to MatthewRhoads.com. For those who are watching on YouTube, you can see that link pop up as we're having this conversation, but I'll make sure that that's also in the show notes. Matthew, I want to ask you a question that I ask all my guests, which is, if there's something that our leaders can do tomorrow or next week to enhance your leadership journey, what would you recommend?
I just really think that you just got to be a continuous learner and just try and connect with as many people as possible, because I think your network is your net worth. And I think that, to me, it's being connected for people locally as well as on social media globally, and being able to see the latest and greatest and hearing people's thoughts and discourse is something that's really powerful. And I think that as a leader, it's just pinnacle to be did, and just kind of being always thinking and learning about what you can do to improve what you're trying to do on a day-to-day basis.
Real quick, we had touched on your podcast. Will you just share out what that is and how people can
so the podcast is called Navigating Education, the podcast. I've definitely taken the brakes off that quite a bit. I've been doing a few monologues here and there. I've had a lot of guests, trying to get picked back up. It's just one of those things where I think when you get in a rhythm, it's easy just continuing to do them. Once you get out of them and want to do something a little different, it's hard to get back into it. But it's something that done many different episodes, about I think like 85 episodes thus far. So just a good resource if you want to check out things on all things instruction, EdTech, that type of stuff.
For sure. There's quite a catalog, so folks need to head over there and take a listen. I know that it's going to help you in your journey. Matt, you had talked about, the power connection. I'd love for folks to, after they're listening to this conversation, to click on your social media link. So where would you like to direct them today?
Yeah, so you can go first to my website, MatthewRhoads.com, and whether you're on Blue Sky, Instagram, X/Twitter, you can just search my name. I have a number of different handles. Dr. Rhoads EDU, Matthew Rhoads, or Matt Rhoads 1990. You can definitely connect with me on whatever platforms that you're on, because I know that there's so many nowadays that you can't keep track of them all.
Yeah, that's very true. But if you head over to his website, obviously there's links that you can click on there to find all of his social media applications and handles. So absolutely love it. I'm sending everyone over to my website because I'm going to have links to Matt's books also, which are extremely impactful. So make sure you're heading over to joshtamper.com. And like I said, I'll have not only links for the books, but for his website and all of his social media links also. So make sure you're heading over there and connecting with that. Matt, I just wanted to thank you so much for finally being on Aspire to Lead. And I'm so sorry for the time that it's taken to get you here, but I'm just so honored to not only be connected with you, but then also to have you here to share insights and wisdom for our aspiring and current leaders.
Definitely, Joshua. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun, and hopefully in the next closer than 2 years that you can be on my podcast again or jump on another podcast of yours again. So hope to chat with you again soon.
That'd be wonderful.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. We'll see you on the next episode.